For my entire life, I thought of myself as a striker. I had done karate, taekwondo, Muay Thai, and I didn't really care for any grappling, no grappling at all. I tried it, it wasn't for me. I was always bigger than everybody. I was always stronger than everybody, but I never used it. My favorite part about striking was how fast it would let me be. But for whatever reason, over these last 2 years, I found myself getting more and more into the other side of martial arts. Through these learnings, I found these like stories and pieces of information that just lead me to believe that we're supposed to be grappling. In 6th grade, I was given an option to try out for the wrestling team or to play baseball. My friend was doing baseball and I chose baseball. That was my last year that I played baseball. I never started wrestling. Actually, I hit a grand slam.
Home run!
But that would have seriously altered my trajectory as a martial artist if I'd wrestled this whole time. Because I'll be honest, my wrestling's it's trash. Every time I'd wrestled somebody, I would lose 100% of the time. Sambo, I got demolished. Book, demolished. Frontier style, demolished. By somebody who's much smaller than me, by the way. Jiu-jitsu, demolished, always. Judo, demolished, always. Sumo is the one time that I've found a middle ground. But we'll talk more about that later. There's something about wrestling that I think is inherent to human development. And don't just take my word for it. The first known instance of wrestling was Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh is probably the oldest story that we can actually get our hands on. At nearly 4,000 years old, the story starts with a character a little less than savory named Gilgamesh. He's the king of the city called Uruk. He was pretty well known for crashing weddings and calling dibs on wives. Anyway, fairly, a goddess was upset with his actions and sent down a rival, Enkidu. There's more to the story obviously, but Enkidu and Gilgamesh at some point wrestled throughout the city of Uruk. And after a long, hard-fought battle where no one can truly get the upper hand, they become friends. And we get the first of many instances where wrestling is used as a tool to solve disputes. And it's in literally the first story ever. To go forwards in time a little bit, this reminded me of Abraham Lincoln, well-known American president, and his only loss in wrestling.
Who's the loss against? Okay.
We know it was during the Black Hawk War, and he was in a volunteer military group, and he wrestled another champion from a different volunteer military group for who got the best campsite.
But these two aren't even the only examples. The King of France, Francis I, and Henry VIII had a wrestling match to promote peace within their countries. They became very good friends afterwards. Hutlun, a Mongolian warrior princess, didn't want to just marry any man. It had to be a man who could beat her in wrestling. In the Iliad, Aias and Odysseus, they wrestled. They didn't become friends afterwards, but what else? Oh, this is some big guy who challenged me to wrestle after a rec volleyball game when I was in college. What? I guess that was a different big guy, and he was like, I don't like that there's two of us. But this guy, not a wrestler, was like, hey, I think I could out-wrestle you. That was his metric of who's the big guy.
Oh my gosh, is this not over yet?
What's going on?
Shoot, Southwest Airlines in the 90s had beef with Stevens Aviation over the use of the same slogan, plain smart, spelled like plane. Now, instead of bringing lawyers into this and spending so much money you could probably send Elon Musk to Mars, they decided to just arm wrestle over it. An arm wrestling match, it's still wrestling, I know it's via arm, but... What stinks is that, like, I'm not saying, like, you shouldn't strike. The nature of striking is much more obviously damaging. I think the brutality of striking is what make it not life. Striking is death. Submissions were a way to will a position onto someone. Originally, they were just like, ow, this hurts. And the dude was like, yeah, I know it hurts. You better go somewhere else. And then they'd go somewhere else. They'd be like, yes, great. The transition I was looking for. Striking, there's no way around it. You are trying to separate someone's body from their consciousness. I think that's sick. I think it's really cool, to be honest. I think the nature of grappling, it's what makes it life. When you see animals play, you'll see them wrestle just to like practice and maneuver with something. It's not even just us that wrestle. I think of Daniel Cormier all the time, how he always has those clips where he's like walking up to people and he's like, hey, hello brother, how you doing? He puts on the Dagestani accent for some reason, even though I think he was born in Louisiana. And he's like, how are you doing, brother? Ah, you feel strong. It's not just him that does it. I've got a buddy, Eric, who coaches wrestling. He'll just walk up to me and he does the same thing. And if you're not somebody who grew up in that, you're like, hey man, what's up, how are you? Good seeing you. I'm just gonna whoop. But that's clearly a form of communication, and they're not the only ones that do it. Lavelle was telling us about this at the book camp.
They're so sweet, the biggest, scariest looking dudes, but once you get to know them, they're so sweet, you know? They just sit on your lap, they like rub you, and at first I was like, yo, you know what I mean? I mean, the first time I met them, it was like, looking at me, they go up and start rubbing your chest, they'll start feeling you and stuff, but after a while, it's just like, that's what they do. They're just close, right? It's just like as a man, you feel the muscles, you want to feel the strength of that person. Now they're like, hey, you know?
And after doing a little bit of research, this is called haptic communication. It's just nonverbal communication via touch. When you think about like personal space and what that means to you, the University of Minnesota defines it a couple different ways. There's public space, which is like somebody's 12 feet away from you. Social space, where it's the talking area. You have personal space, where somebody's getting to a point where like if you don't know and trust them, they kind of don't even want to be this close. And then there's the intimate space, which is where all of this hanging and clinging begins. This is an intimate zone reserved for friends, family, partners. You cannot ignore someone in this space. So to feel comfortable with someone being in this space requires a level of trust and unspoken communication that is like humanity at its highest level. Humans need that kind of contact. But I don't think anybody's thinking that. I think they're like, haha, wrestle fun. Oh, hi crotch. Not like, hello, like, like the takedown attempt. So dumb. Hey, also, I know this is a video about grappling, but HayabusaFight.com has some of the best gear out there. Their boxing gloves are their specialty. They consistently have the best designs. I get complimented more on my gloves than I get on anything else about me. Anything else. It's probably not hard to believe, and you can get 10% off using my coupon code Sensei Seth 10. 10% off. It's a holiday season. It's a great gift. They also have gis. I've been wearing their jiu-jitsu gi for a long time. It's incredibly aesthetic and it's very durable. What else do you need in a gi? It fits well. There's more things. They're the best of the best. They've been a long-time sponsor of the channel.
I feel pretty good.
If you want a pair of gloves, you want to get somebody else a pair of gloves, HayabusaFight.com/Sensei Seth. Use code Sensei Seth 10 for 10% off. If you're somebody who likes punching people or grappling people, it's quality equipment. The next major life topic we're going to talk about is health. Most of the time I work out with a heart rate monitor on. Earlier this year, I put a heart rate monitor on and then went back and forth between kickboxing and wrestling. Wrestling was much more demanding of my heart. I had to get blood to more muscles more regularly, and my heart rate was up like the whole time. There's moments in kickboxing where you can kind of stall and wait a little bit, but even when you're stalling in wrestling, I mean, for the most part, you're still actively pushing against someone else. And I mean, we all know what Robert California says.
1 9-minute bout is a cardiovascular equivalent of running uphill for 3 hours.
Okay, I don't know exactly how true that is. I also think that wrestlers have one of the more optimized muscular builds. I mean, on my end, I sumo wrestle. I can tell my body has gotten different. I've gained a lot more muscle mass in the time that I have been. A lot of people don't think of sumo as the optimum body type. I get it. This is the peak male physique right here. Get used to it. You don't like it? Wrestle me, big guy. I mean, just think about it. You use pretty much every single muscle you can fathom when you grapple. Oh, let's do a test. On your own body right now, point to a muscle. Oh my gosh, that is so small. Do you work out? No, sorry, what I meant to say was you can probably think of a way you could use that muscle when you're grappling. And that's only your physical health. It is well documented at this point that exercise increases your mental health. This is completely anecdotal, but you probably feel the same way. On days that I work out, I feel better afterwards. Now I will admit there's kind of a big but that looms over all this. No, not that one. Injuries happen, and they're not particularly healthy most of the time, but I'm a believer that they happen because of two reasons. One, competition, whether it be the actual competition or competition prep. You are going so hard that stuff goes wrong. Or two, you're rolling with someone who's bad. Or maybe you're the bad one. I think that if you're wrestling the way you should be wrestling, nothing should go wrong. But anyway, something cool that I've learned in this last year is that the Greeks knew mental and physical health were both tied to wrestling thousands of years ago.
Had to have been rivals for coaches because it's so widespread. So the amount of citizens that trained. So these palaestras, we should probably speak on that. A palaestra is essentially a state or privately funded gymnasium that allowed all male citizens to come in and hear philosophy, music. They could train boxing, wrestling, Pancratian. So it's almost like this community embetterment center, like the improvement center, right, for our citizens.
I would point out that the Greeks were an extremely competitive people. They have this concept of the agon, which means competition. And that extends to all realms of life. So this kind of competition that went on in the sporting arena was matched by competition in debate, in literary production, politics. Every realm of life among the Greeks is agonistic. It's highly competitive.
And this concept of using wrestling as a tool to gain mental and physical toughness, it carried on through some of the best presidents of the United States. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt.
And like, it's not new, right? Plato, the Greek philosopher, his name literally means broad, and he was an Olympic wrestler. Plato might have been his wrestling name for all we know.
Wow.
Like, that's a real thing.
I think it makes a lot of sense for a wrestler to be a philosopher too, because like, half the time I spend wrestling, I'm often just reconsidering all my life choices.
Oh, it feels like there's a lot to unpack there for you.
That could be, though, because of the amount of pressure I put on myself when it comes to competition. Speaking of which, I just entered a new one with two new friends of mine, Josh and Bren. It's their first time ever sumo wrestling. They'll have more in-depth videos on their experiences, I'll link them down below. But in my first competition after entering a world sumo tournament, my mindset when it goes into this style of grappling is what I have the hardest time grappling. See, I have to admit, I'm good at winning matches so far, but I came into this tournament wanting to slow down. But by the time I get into matches, I don't do that. I try to win as fast as I can. In practice, it's easy for me to feel out my opponent and make movements based off of their movements. But the nature of sumo, it kind of has like a positive and negative interaction with aggression. I want there to be chaos, but I want it to be a controlled chaos. And while I did win matches, I feel like that's something I'm still definitely working on. Which is the beauty of competition.
And your winner is Seth.
Not every grappling sport is like sumo, though. I totally recognize that. In fact, some of my best attributes in sumo have very little to do with grappling. But I will tell you that Josh and Bren are grapplers. And I have to admit, they did pretty dang good.
So I think this sumo tournament was one of the most fun experiences at a tournament that I've had in a while. There's something about sumo where it's so fast and explosive and you can just kind of let loose and do whatever you want. And maybe part of that is because I came into this without any training, so I didn't have any expectations to hit certain techniques or anything like that. For me, I think wrestling and grappling translates to a happy life for a variety of reasons. One of the biggest ones is that it teaches me to overcome obstacles instead of just giving up right when I encounter something that's difficult. The other thing is that it makes me feel less insecure. It also makes me more humble. Since in grappling and wrestling and competition, there's a fixed outcome, so you know whether what you did worked or it didn't work. Yeah, so I think it just made, oh, there's a cool squirrel right there. What the fuck are these geese doing? Okay, anyway.
I'm sure it is also really good for your attention span. For some people. But competitive-wise, I totally agree with the sentiment that he puts out. There is nothing more humbling than being tossed onto your head like 17 times in a row. There's nothing more humbling than being put in a position that you cannot get out of. There's especially nothing more humbling than when you're given a dominant position and you still can't do anything about it. Having to understand and cope with that concept that someone has bested you. There are people that are better at things than you are. It gets instilled in you pretty quickly, and to be honest, I think that's like what 99% of people are missing out on these days. Once you have that humility, you know how easily you can be broken. In my opinion, I think you're less likely to break other people, which is kind of the same and kind of different than this story that Josh Kostler was telling me. Essentially about how wrestling was so popular back in the day, but special conditions wrestling that was less likely to get you hurt.
So, like we talked about Savat before, where it started out as a game to play on boats.
Yeah.
Lots of these arts that would one day become what we think of as the wrestling styles that stretched across North America.
Yeah.
Started as games. We both know how bodies go.
Sure.
Wrestling is familiar to us. So we might agree on a standing win condition. We're on a boat. We don't want to go to ground. There's tetanus down there.
Yeah.
So we might agree. Both underhooks in or hands around the neck is a win. You want to give that a shot?
Let's do it, yeah.
Yeah, because they can't go all the way to ground. They still have to stay in fighting shape.
Yeah.
Maybe they do sword drills.
Yeah.
You're not going to shoot on a boat with a powder magazine at the bottom.
Makes total sense.
So like a lot of these rules and games exist so that we can still function on a boat or in a military encampment.
Yeah, right, like while you have to walk 30 miles to get to the next battle.
Or if we're frontiersmen and we're frontier wrestling and you break a leg and I have to feed you through winter because I broke your leg, if I hurt you while we are even conditionally sparring and I ruin your combat capability, I have broken government property. And we have like a monarch with a guillotine.
Not even like the... No, not that kind either.
Like the pull the lever, wrong lever cronk guillotine.
Yes. Like, look around for 7 seconds after you don't have a head type of guillotine. Okay. And for our last cultural stop of the day, I know I've said this a lot, but this reminds me of backhold. Backhold, which I'm sure you knew all this already, but I'll tell you anyway. It's a wrestling style that's usually associated with the Highland Games, and it's a feat of strength between men. You start off in an over-under with a held back position. The way you win is you get your opponent to let go, or you put them on the ground. This style isn't designed to smash people into the ground when you get takedowns. In fact, if you do, you're supposed to elegantly land over top of them, usually shoulder rolling. It's probably fair to assume that's to not hurt your opponent. Man, does that sound better. There's no avoiding it. These things cross over so many times throughout our history. Sometimes probably passed down, but a lot of these features and characteristics of cultures that wrestle, I think, showed up independently. As far as like a conclusion for this goes, I don't really have one. I just kind of wanted to record this video because I feel like I've had so many things that I've noticed about grappling through my inexperience and, you know, kind of gaining these perspectives at different cultures throughout humanity and just watching people and kind of learning for it myself. These have been things that I've enjoyed, and I wanted to relay them in case you didn't know about them, or maybe you did and you wanted to feel nostalgic about somebody who used to wrestle you and grab your butt cheeks. At least as Americans, we've kind of strayed away from it when a lot of the money and the legend and the social status of American sports like baseball, basketball, football, as those have risen, our grappling and striking has gone down. Our combat sports have fallen by the wayside. And I don't know, I think these are cool pieces of history that are just extra fun, you know? And we're missing out. So go grab somebody. Ask them first, because not everybody likes that. Come here, brother. How have you been? How's the wife and kids? You feel good, man. You feel strong. You been working out? Oh, I missed you. I missed your scent. We should get food sometime. How does that feel? No, not food. How does that grip feel? Do you like that?